All right, thank you all so much for being here. Today we're going to be talking about effective instruction and how, as educators, we hope this is our goal, right, to be effective. So we're just going to start out real quick, kind of turn to the person closest to you and share the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of effective instruction.
I was just going to say that.
Good learning. Oh, you're behind there.
Yeah.
This is like when we took that safety class, right? That was actually fun when I think of it.
It was fun.
Yeah.
I actually learned a lot.
I did.
So I heard a lot of great little buzzwords along with effective teaching. This word cloud I found just kind of gives a whole bunch of those words, and I heard you saying some of those words, and I think that these are all words we could agree we hope for when we're teaching and that we want for our students. But one thing that I think happens sometimes is we are in survival mode, right? This year more than ever, I have felt like just kind of in survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, sometimes you aren't being an effective teacher. And so reflecting on, are questions only being given at a low level? Am I only asking simple tasks of my students? Am I only engaging with the students that have their hands raised that really want to be called on, or maybe the students that are a behavior problem, and all the kids that kind of fly under the radar, I'm not really interacting with? Am I talking more than my students? That can be a big one, right? Is it just me talking, me sharing, and they're just silent bystanders? And another one I can be really guilty of is developing or looking at my assessment or rubric at the end of instruction instead of using it at the beginning to drive my instruction. So we don't want to be in survival mode teaching, right? We want to live in that effective instruction. So today we're going to talk about some of the ways that we can do that. Cues, questions, and advanced organizers are a huge way for us to start our lesson, and they can be in all content areas. I have some parenting advice that I'm reminded of when I think of this. My favorite parenting advice Andrew and I were given was begin as you mean to go. And that means that wherever you want to end up, wherever you want to be, you want to start with that end in mind. And so when we're starting a lesson with our students, we want to focus the lesson on what we really want them to learn. We want them to be motivated. We want them to be engaged. We want them to be curious. And so if we want all of those things, then we need to be intentional from the beginning of our lesson. And that will help us to create strong students. So when we're doing this, we need to be explicit. This is kind of one of those helpful reminders, right? In college, you learn that you should share the objective with the class. But then class starts and everybody's filtering in at different times, and then you just want to start the lesson. But to be explicit and say, today we are going to learn about this because this, and really outline the objective for the students. As teachers, when we're at a training, we want to know, what am I getting out of this? What am I learning? Why am I here? Our students feel the same way. They want to know what's going to happen and what they're learning. We want to set them up for success, and we can do that by accessing their prior knowledge. Things like anticipation guides are a great way for them to see, what do I already know? What am I curious about? Even correct misconceptions sometimes right from the beginning that they have. Now with that kind of thing, variety is necessary. I tend to have my one cute little way that I access prior knowledge, but we have a room full of very different learners. So kind of giving them a Swiss Army knife, all different kinds of activity guides and anticipation guides and ways to access prior knowledge will help engage all our learners. And another thing with our iPads this year, I think we can rethink when we use certain resources. A lot of times I save that awesome clip or the cool game that I found on the iPad for the end, but that can be a way to engage the learner from the beginning and make them excited about the content, and then they want to actually learn it through the part that's really the difficult, meaty part of it, and then you can circle back around to that game at the end. So I think using them at the beginning can be a helpful way. So a few final things to consider with these. Advanced organizers don't always have to require writing or me creating something. An advanced organizer can be skimming the text, taking a book walk, looking ahead at what you're going to be learning to ignite that prior knowledge. And also during this process, it's so important for the students to reflect on what they're thinking and what they're learning. So just even the simple thumb up, thumb in the middle, thumb down can help you know, what's their interest level, do they already have prior knowledge, and you can scan the room and see where they're at all at one time. One of my favorite ways to engage students as learners is through non-linguistic representation. So when we allow them not just to label and fill out and do a worksheet, when they actually get to create and use pictures and use non-verbal ways to show their learning, it is amazing at how much deeper they connect with the material. So for instance, this activity here, you guys may recognize some of these faces from a long time ago. We were learning about longitude and latitude and hemispheres and all this. The quick, easy way is to print off a worksheet where they label all those parts. But the really fun, engaging way that will make them hopefully remember it is that they got all these different parts. They all got a construction paper globe, they got yarn, they got Post-its, they got paper, and they made a model of what that looks like. And so what that does for the learner is it really gets them involved in the process. They have to actually know what these things are to make a model. They can't just guess and make a label and get it correct. The other thing it does for me as the teacher is it helps me circle around to who needs more help. This top group here put an equator line and a prime meridian line, but they put no longitude and latitude lines. So I can visually see they need more help on that. Whereas this group labeled everything I could have possibly hoped for. So with non-linguistic representation, we're thinking of ways that they can be creative and use pictures and use manipulatives and use things other than just their words to show their learning. These can be graphic organizers. Again, it can be kinesthetic. My students love also this very silly rhyme I made up to help them remember longitude and latitude. And we act like ballerinas and we do the longitude and latitude. But even my 5th grade boys twirl around the room like silly kids, but it sticks, And then this circle map is a good example of taking kind of a lower level graphic organizer with basic information, but then kicking it up a notch by having them create an illustration from that circle map. And a student is going to remember way more what Spanish explorers did in Florida if they have to create an illustration of it than if they just read it out of the textbook or create a basic simple circle map. I still remember the quadratic formula from high school because of the song. So anytime you can engage the brain with music, with motions, any of that, you are going to have a better chance for your students to remember and stick and become strong with that information. And it's always good if you're going to use a new tool to start with something familiar. So if you've never done a Venn diagram with your students, don't start by comparing the brand new thing you're learning about. Start with something like a banana and a lemon that they have deep knowledge of so that they can compare when the stakes are low, and then use that graphic organizer when the stakes are high with the new content. Summarizing and note-taking might be one of the most important skills we learn that we use our whole life, but I bet most of us probably can't remember who taught us how to do it, and we might still struggle to be good at it. And it's so important. And I think that one of the things that we need to recognize is that it's not intuitive. We want it to be. We want them to just be able to take notes and summarize, but it has to be modeled. If we don't model it, then it will stay at a level where their notes and their summaries are not helpful. And I think we can all see non-examples in our classes. I try to use highlighting as a way to scaffold summarizing and note-taking, but you've got kids that highlight the entire page or highlight nothing. Or you ask for a summary and they tell you the whole story, or they tell you 2 words. And it seems like a lot of times we're not in that sweet spot in the middle that we want to be. And so that means that we've got to support them. We have to model it because we want them to have this skill as they move beyond elementary school. So there are many ways to support this model for summarizing. You can see there's rules that you can actively teach kids of how to make a summary. I think you're probably familiar with the somebody wanted but so, and that can be such a great tool to help elementary learners really narrow down the most important things from a story that they read. I am super guilty of this. An important and often missed step is to have the students review and revise and clarify their notes. I think that I sometimes do a really good job of engaging the note-taking, but I don't actively teach them how to go back and review their notes and use their notes as a study tool, which is also not something that we innately know how to do. We have to be explicitly taught. Remember that note-taking can be fun. It can include pictures. If one of your students wants to use 8 different colored gel pens, go for it, because if that makes you engage, then that is what matters. And again, start with low stakes. If you want summarizing for a story, use a story like The Three Little Pigs that they all know, and then move to summarizing this brand new higher level Lexile text that the students are on that week. Homework and practice sometimes can be our nemesis, right? How much is too much? How much is enough? I think that pretty much nobody can agree. And it can be a really tricky thing, and it can cause friction between us and our families and our students. I think my views on it have changed since I have my own children than when I was a new teacher that didn't have school-aged kids. But what I do know is that no matter what, practice and homework should be deepening their understanding and working towards proficiency. If it's not doing those things, it's not worth anybody's time. So we want them to also be able to perform those tasks independently. We should have supported them enough that they can do that without our help. And in that way, we can consider parents and guardians to be our allies with homework instead of our enemies. Because if we have truly supported the kids and we really believe that the practice is something that is going to bring them to proficiency, then we should all be on the same page and all hopefully be happy together. So when we implement homework policies, it's really helpful when a school has a whole school homework policy. I think our school does a pretty good job of that. And again, we want to be intentional, have a clear purpose, and support learning. And something that I think is, it's just about being intentional, right? Like a reading log is probably one of our most standard reading homeworks that we have in elementary school. But it can sometimes feel like busy work or just checking off the box, and you know you've got families that just initial it whether they read or not. But the way you can be unintentional is that each day they are targeting one of the reading skills that you're learning that week. And so it is connected to the reading learning for the week instead of just go home and read 20 minutes because reading is good for you. This is connecting it to what they're learning in school, and that gives added value. And don't forget to provide feedback. I think that when I turn in something to a boss or share something with a friend and I get no feedback, I think, oh my gosh, what did they think? Was I right? Was I wrong? You know, all these questions, probably because of my personality, but I think our students feel the same way. If we thought it was important enough to assign, are we really giving proper feedback? And if not, then that value starts to feel lost, and our students start to feel like it wasn't actually as important as we made it seem if we didn't take the time to give them feedback. Again, I feel like I can't say this enough, be reflective. I think to myself when I'm assigning homework, would I value this assignment for my own child? Now, having my own child in my grade this year, I am thinking that at a completely different level, but would I value that if it was my own child? And again, encouragement goes a long way. My goodness, I have 5th graders line up for stickers, and you would think that by 5th grade they wouldn't care, but they do, because they love to feel appreciated and that you're proud of them. So, one of the next things we're going to talk about is identifying similarities and differences. And I think that this is something that we have a lot of opportunities to do with our students in all our subject areas. I feel like Venn diagrams are something by the time that your students get to 5th grade, it's something they're familiar with. But there's a few things we can just make sure that we're really being intentional about. And we want to know that the whole reason behind this is that students are connecting ideas together and growing their schema so that, again, they are really strong learners that can handle the next level of rigor. So, if you want to do something like a triple Venn diagram, it will blow your students' minds. They will be like, a triple? We've only ever done a double. And so, but they like get excited about it. They think it's so cool. And so one way I've done this is, following the I do, we do, you do. So I will show a triple Venn diagram that I model on the board with something simple, low stakes. And then we'll do one together about something we're learning. So in this one here, it was earthquakes, volcanoes, and tornadoes. And the students wrote their own ideas on Post-its and came and brought it to the appropriate spot in that triple Venn diagram. And then the really, really important next step was providing feedback. there were misconceptions the first time around. There were Post-its in spots that they shouldn't have been. And so in that moment, to be able to correct that and move those helps that learner to understand something, and that is going to stick. And then when they go to test on that, that is going to be a real learning experience they had instead of a misconception that they still hold. Another important thing is that comparing needs to happen before they can classify. They can't classify into groups if they can't first understand the similarities and differences to begin with. Venn diagrams aren't the end all be all. I found a lot of other examples online, like this compare and contrast matrix, which is just a different way to make your brain think about similarities and differences. And again, with our iPads, there are so many interactive games that the students in this one can drag the organism or the animal into the right little bucket. And if they are incorrect, it pops it right back out, and they have immediate feedback that, oh, that was wrong, and they can correct that misconception and have that automatic feedback. Generating and testing hypothesis is a huge part of our science curriculum, and I think that we try really, really hard to get this right in science. But one thing I've been learning and seeing is that it doesn't just have to be in the science classroom. And so we want students to be making predictions, making inferences, drawing conclusions in all subjects. It lends itself, I think some of those you can think how it would lend itself to reading, but it can even be in social studies and math as well. And at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to encourage problem solving, and we want to do this in all content areas. So one way this could be implemented in another class would be a systems analysis, where students are making hypotheses and testing out what they think about a system that's in place. And so I do this with taxation of the colonies in the American Revolution. And so what I have is the students all draw cards, and they're either colonists or King George or the tax collector, and I ask them how they think this is going to go, and talk about how in the beginning everybody was loyalists and they still were loyal to the king. But then as we go through the taxation simulation, they're able to, revise their predictions and think about what's happening, and they start kind of doing some role play and acting things out. And a lot of times by the end, all the students now claim that they're patriots, when at the beginning they said everybody was going to stay loyal to the king and do the right thing and pay their taxes, So this is a way that they can really engage at a higher level, and hopefully, again, that information will really stick in their brain. One of the things about problem solving and testing hypothesis that I think is really good is it can normalize being wrong. We don't always get it right the first time. And I think we all have students that struggle when their first pass at something doesn't go well and they shut down. So when we are engaging them in testing hypothesis and problem solving, we normalize that sometimes your first pass at something isn't going to go the way you hoped. That's okay. Keep working and work through that adversity. And it can also be fun. Again, that low stakes way of teaching them this process, hold an uncooked egg and ask them what's going to happen when you drop that egg, and walk them through the whole hypothesis problem solution. And then they're just shocked that you would drop a raw egg on the ground, but that helps them walk through the steps in a very low stakes and engaging way. So my encouragement to you is that effective teaching is something we're all capable of. And the tendency sometimes can be that when we get really busy or we have a hard year like this, that we let some of those best practices kind of get tucked away for a little while. But I hope that today you are encouraged that we have pathways that we can all be effective teachers. And I'm super, super grateful that you were here, and I hope that it was helpful to you. Thank you so much for your time.